Sarah Martinez pushed open the heavy glass door of Richmond shooting range on a cool Tuesday morning in September. The sound of gunshots echoed through the building as she stepped inside. She was 62 years old with silver hair tied back, in a simple ponytail. Her blue jeans were comfortable and worn. Her sweater was faded but clean. She carried an old canvas bag over her shoulder that looked like it had seen many years of use. The shooting range was busy even though it was early morning. Most of the people there were men. They were younger than Sarah and dressed in expensive, tactical gear. Some wore military-style vests covered in pockets. Others had holsters attached to their belts that looked brand new. Their boots were polished black leather that squeaked when they walked across the concrete floor. Sarah looked around quietly. She noticed how confident these men seemed. They talked loudly about their weekend hunting trips. They compared their newest rifle scopes and pistol grips. Their voices carried across the room as they bragged about their shooting scores from the previous week. None of them paid any attention to the older woman who had just walked in. The front counter was made of heavy wood and covered with shooting magazines. Behind it stood Chuck Morrison, the range master. He was a large man with thick arms and a gray beard. His shirt was tight across his chest and had the range logo printed on the pocket. Chuck was deep in conversation with 3 regular customers. They were discussing the best ammunition for deer hunting season. Sarah walked slowly toward the counter. Her canvas bag bounced gently against her hip with each step. She waited patiently while Chuck finished his conversation about hunting. The men at the counter were planning a trip to the mountains. They talked about which rifles to bring and where to set up their camp. Sarah stood quietly behind them without interrupting. After several minutes, Chuck noticed her standing there. He looked surprised to see an elderly woman in his shooting range. His eyebrows raised slightly as he took in her appearance. Sarah looked like someone who should be baking cookies for her grandchildren, not practicing with firearms. Chuck had owned the range for 15 years and rarely saw women her age as customers. "Ma'am, can I help you with something?" Chuck asked. His voice was not mean, but it carried doubt. "Are you maybe looking for someone who works here? Or perhaps you are trying to find the community center next door?" Sarah smiled gently at him. Her voice was soft but clear when she spoke. "I would like to become a member of your shooting range, please. I brought all the paperwork you require." She reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were her identification papers, background check results, and the membership application she had filled out at home. Everything was organized, neatly and completed in careful handwriting. Sarah placed the folder on the wooden counter and waited. Chuck looked confused. He opened the folder and began reading through her documents. Everything appeared to be in order. Sarah Martinez, age 62, clean background check, no criminal record. But Chuck still seemed uncertain about having her as a member. "Ma'am, I have to ask," Chuck said slowly. "Do you have any experience with firearms? This is a serious facility. We have strict safety rules. Some of our members are former military and police officers. They expect everyone here to know what they are doing." Sarah nodded politely. "Yes, sir. I understand completely. I know how to handle firearms safely. I will follow all of your rules." Chuck shrugged his shoulders and began processing her membership. As he typed information into his computer, he explained the basic safety rules. He spoke to Sarah like she was a child learning something difficult. He told her to always keep the gun pointed toward the targets. He explained that she must wear eye protection and ear protection at all times. He described how the range operated and what hours she could practice. Sarah listened to everything Chuck said. She nodded at the right moments and asked appropriate questions. She never interrupted him or acted like she already knew the information. When Chuck handed her the member card and range rules, she thanked him graciously. "Lane 15 is available," Chuck said, pointing toward the far end of the shooting range. "That will be a good spot for you to start. Take your time and be careful." Sarah walked toward lane 15 carrying her canvas bag. The shooting range was long and narrow with concrete walls. The ceiling was high with bright lights hanging down. Each lane was separated by thick walls that absorbed sound. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air mixed with the scent of cleaning oil. The other shooters were focused on their own practice. They stood in shooting stances that looked professional and practiced. Their equipment was expensive and modern. Sarah could see laser sights, custom grips, and tactical accessories attached to their weapons. These men had clearly spent thousands of dollars on their hobby. At lane 15, Sarah set down her canvas bag carefully. She unzipped it slowly and pulled out a worn leather gun case. The case was old but well maintained. The leather was soft from years of handling. Sarah opened the case to reveal a simple pistol. It was not fancy or expensive looking. The metal was clean but showed signs of age and use. Sarah began setting up her equipment methodically. She arranged her ammunition boxes in a neat row. She placed her eye protection and ear protection where she could reach them easily. Everything she did was deliberate and careful. There was no wasted motion in her movements. Her hands trembled slightly as she loaded bullets into the magazine. The trembling was not from fear or nervousness. It came from emotions that Sarah had kept buried for many years. She had not held a firearm for over 15 years, not since the day she retired from her career. Memories flooded back as she felt the familiar weight of the weapon in her hands. Sarah took a deep breath and tried to focus on the present moment. She was just another member at a shooting range now. Her past was behind her. No one here knew who she had been or what she had done during her working years. She was simply a grandmother who wanted to practice shooting for personal reasons. The other shooters continued their conversations and competitions. None of them looked in her direction or wondered about her story. To them, she was exactly what she appeared to be, an older woman trying something new. Sarah was grateful for their lack of attention. She wanted to blend in and avoid questions about her background. As she prepared for her first shot in 15 years, Sarah felt a mixture of sadness and relief. The skills that had once been so important were still there, waiting to be remembered. But the pressure and responsibility that had gone with those skills were finally gone. She could shoot for herself now, without the weight of other people's lives depending on her accuracy. The regulars at Richmond Shooting Range had their own special group. They came to the range almost every day and knew each other well. Jake Stevens was the unofficial leader of this group. He had been a police officer for 12 years before retiring. Jake loved to show off his quick draw skills to anyone who would watch. He could pull his pistol from his holster faster than most people could blink. Marcus Williams owned a security company in town. He brought new employees to the range to test their shooting abilities. Marcus was proud of his marksmanship skills and often bragged about winning local shooting competitions. His gun belt was covered with expensive accessories that gleamed under the range lights. The youngest member of the group was Tommy Chen. He was only 25 years old, but had already spent more money on shooting equipment than most people spend on cars. Tommy had custom grips made from exotic wood. His pistol had laser sights and a special trigger that cost more than some people make in a week. He loved talking about his latest purchases and modifications. These three men and several others had created their own hierarchy at the shooting range. They decided who was skilled and who was not. They judged other shooters based on their equipment and how much money they spent on accessories. New members had to prove themselves worthy of joining their conversations. When they first noticed Sarah practicing quietly in lane 15, their reactions were predictable. Jake nudged Marcus with his elbow and pointed in her direction. Sarah was taking her time with each shot. She would aim carefully, breathe deeply, and squeeze the trigger, slowly. Between shots, she would pause for long moments, staring at her target. "Look at Grandma over there," Jake whispered to Marcus. "She is shooting like she has all day. Probably never hit anything smaller than a barn door in her life." Marcus chuckled and shook his head. "My grandmother shoots better than that, and she is 80 years old. Maybe someone should offer to help her before she hurts herself." Tommy was adjusting his expensive laser sight when he glanced toward Sarah's lane. Her equipment looked ancient compared to his modern gear. Her pistol was plain black metal without any custom modifications. She did not have a tactical vest or special shooting gloves. Everything about her setup looked basic and outdated. "She probably bought that gun at a pawn shop," Tommy said with a smirk. "I bet it is older than I am. Someone should tell her that modern equipment makes shooting much easier." The three men continued their practice while keeping one eye on Sarah. They expected to see her struggling with poor accuracy and basic mistakes. Beginning shooters usually had trouble keeping their shots on the target. Most newcomers got frustrated quickly and left after a few sessions. But something strange was happening in lane 15. When the range went quiet between shooting sessions, the men could see Sarah's targets clearly. Her bullet holes were grouped together tightly in small circles. Almost every shot was hitting near the center of the target. Her accuracy was better than most of the regular shooters achieved on their best days. Jake walked closer to get a better look at Sarah's target. He counted the bullet holes and measured the distance between them with his eyes. The grouping was impressively tight. Most of the shots would have scored perfect 10s in any competition. Jake felt confused because this level of accuracy did not match Sarah's slow, careful shooting style. Must be beginner's luck, Jake told himself. Or maybe Chuck is giving her closer targets to make her feel good about herself. Marcus noticed the same thing during his next break. Sarah's target showed consistent accuracy that spoke of years of practice, but her shooting position looked old-fashioned. She stood with her feet slightly apart and leaned forward just a little. Modern shooting stances were different from what Sarah was using. She probably learned to shoot 50 years ago and never updated her technique, Marcus explained to the others. Old habits die hard, but you cannot argue with those results. Tommy was the most bothered by Sarah's accuracy. He had spent thousands of dollars on equipment to improve his shooting. His custom trigger was supposed to make him more accurate. His laser sight should have given him an advantage, but Sarah was outperforming him with basic equipment that looked like it belonged in a museum. There is something weird about this, Tommy muttered. Nobody shoots that well with such old gear. She must be getting lucky, or the targets are rigged, somehow. The dismissive attitudes toward Sarah continued for several weeks. She came to the range 3 times every week at the same times. She always used lane 15 and followed the exact same routine. Sarah would unpack her equipment methodically, practice for exactly 2 hours, and clean everything carefully before leaving. She never tried to join conversations with the regular shooters. When they made comments about her slow shooting pace, she would smile politely and continue her practice. Sarah brought her own targets from home and kept detailed notes in a small spiral notebook. She recorded every shot and tracked her progress over time. Chuck began to notice things about Sarah that the younger men missed completely. She followed safety rules with military precision. Her weapon was always pointed in a safe direction. She never swept the muzzle across other people when moving or reloading. These habits showed deep training that went beyond basic gun safety courses. Sarah's breathing was controlled and rhythmic during shooting. She inhaled, held her breath, fired, and exhaled in a pattern that never varied. This type of breath control took years to master and was usually taught in advanced marksmanship courses. Chuck had seen similar techniques used by police snipers and military marksmen. Her movements were economical and efficient. Sarah never wasted motion or energy during her practice sessions. Every action had a purpose and was performed in the same sequence each time. She treated each shot as if it was critically important, not like someone practicing a hobby for fun. One busy Saturday afternoon, the range was packed with weekend shooters. Men brought their friends to show off their skills and compete for bragging rights. The noise level was higher than usual, with conversations and laughter between shooting sessions. Sarah was practicing quietly in her corner lane, ignored by most of the crowd. During this session, Sarah achieved something remarkable that went unnoticed by everyone except Chuck. She fired 50 rounds at various distances from 15 yards to 25 yards. 47 of her shots scored perfect 10s in the center ring. The 3 shots that missed the 10 ring were still 9s, missing the center by tiny fractions of an inch. Chuck had been managing shooting ranges for over 20 years. He had seen police officers, military veterans, and competition shooters practice regularly. Sarah's consistency and accuracy were at a level that few people ever achieved. Yet she continued to be dismissed and overlooked by shooters who could not match her performance with all their expensive equipment and loud bragging. The regular shooters remained convinced that Sarah was just a lucky amateur who would eventually reveal her lack of real skill. They had no idea they were watching one of the most accomplished marksmen who had ever practiced at their range. The Wednesday afternoon in late October started like any other day at Richmond Shooting Range. Sarah arrived at her usual time carrying her worn canvas bag. She nodded politely to Chuck at the front counter and walked to lane 15. The range was quieter than normal with only a few shooters practicing their skills. Chuck had been planning something special for months. He wanted to create a wall of honor to celebrate local heroes who had served their community. The wall would display brass plaques with names and service records of veterans, police officers, and other people who had made sacrifices for others. Chuck believed the shooting range should honor those who had used their skills to protect innocent people. Sarah was halfway through her practice session when Chuck made an announcement over the intercom system. His voice echoed through the range building as he asked everyone to gather in the main lobby area. There was going to be a short ceremony to unveil the new Wall of Honor. All range members were welcome to attend and learn about the local heroes being recognized. Sarah felt uncomfortable about joining the ceremony. She preferred to keep to herself and avoid crowds, but Chuck insisted that all members present should participate. He said the Wall of Honor was important for the entire shooting community. Sarah reluctantly set down her equipment and walked toward the lobby with the other shooters. About 30 people gathered in the main area of the range. Most were regular members who came to practice several times each week. Some had brought family members to witness the ceremony. Chuck stood in front of a large wooden board covered with a white sheet. Behind the sheet were the brass plaques that would make up the Wall of Honor. Chuck cleared his throat and began speaking in a more serious tone than anyone had heard from him before. His usual joking manner was replaced with genuine respect and emotion. He explained that the Wall of Honor would permanently recognize people who had served with courage and distinction. These were individuals who had put their own lives at risk to protect others. Today we honor those who answered the call to serve, Chuck said solemnly. These men and women faced dangerous situations that most of us cannot imagine. They asked for nothing in return except the opportunity to make their communities safer and more secure. Sarah stood quietly in the back of the group. She recognized some faces in the crowd but had never spoken to most of these people. She hoped the ceremony would be brief so she could return to her practice and then go home. Being in groups made her nervous after years of preferring solitude and privacy. Chuck pulled away the white sheet to reveal 12 brass plaques mounted on dark wood. Each plaque contained a name, service dates, and a brief description of the person's contributions. The plaques were arranged in neat rows with small American flags placed between them. The display looked professional and dignified. Chuck began reading the names and service records aloud. The first plaque honored Officer Daniel Murphy, a local police officer who had been killed during a bank robbery in 1998. The second recognized Sergeant First Class Maria Rodriguez, who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before returning home to work with veterans. Each name came with a story of sacrifice and dedication. Sarah listened respectfully as Chuck continued through the list. She knew some of these people by reputation, even though she had never met them personally. Their stories were similar to hundreds of others she had known during her working years. Good people who had chosen difficult careers because they wanted to make a difference. The ceremony continued with Chuck reading about retired firefighters, military veterans, and community volunteers. Each person had contributed something valuable to society. Some had died in service while others had lived long enough to see retirement. All of them deserved recognition for their sacrifices and achievements. Then Chuck reached a plaque that was larger than the others. This one contained more text and had been specially ordered to accommodate additional information. Chuck's voice grew more solemn as he prepared to read what he considered the most important recognition of the day. This next honoree represents a type of service that often goes unnoticed by the public, Chuck announced. Someone who worked for decades in the most dangerous assignments our country has to offer. This person's actions saved countless lives, but their name was rarely mentioned in newspapers because of the classified nature of their work. Sarah felt her heart begin to beat faster. Something about Chuck's words sounded familiar and troubling. She had heard similar descriptions before when people talked about careers like the one she had left behind. Sarah tried to tell herself that many people had worked in classified government jobs. This could be about anyone. Chuck continued reading from the larger plaque. This individual served with distinction in specialized federal law enforcement for 28 years. Their duties included protective operations for high-value targets, counterterrorism activities, advanced marksmanship instruction, and training of federal agents in life-threatening situations. The description was becoming more specific and harder to ignore. Sarah's chest felt tight as she realized where this was heading. Very few careers matched the details Chuck was reading. Her hands began to tremble as memories of her professional life came flooding back into her mind. During their career, this person received commendations for bravery, exceptional marksmanship, and leadership under extreme pressure, Chuck continued. They were responsible for training hundreds of federal agents in firearms skills and tactical operations. Their expertise was sought by multiple government agencies for the most sensitive assignments. Sarah wanted to leave the room but found herself frozen in place. She could not move or speak as Chuck approached the final part of his announcement. Other people in the crowd were listening with interest, wondering who this mysterious person could be. They had no idea the subject of Chuck's speech was standing right behind them. "We are proud to honor Special Agent Sarah Elizabeth Martinez, United States Secret Service retired," Chuck announced clearly. 28 years of distinguished service including protective details for 3 presidents, counter-sniper operations, and advanced marksmanship instruction for federal law enforcement agencies. The silence that followed was complete and overwhelming. Every person in the room slowly turned to look at Sarah standing in the back corner. The modest woman they had seen practicing quietly for months was revealed to be one of the most highly trained federal agents in American history. Her career had involved protecting the most important people in the country during the most dangerous moments of their lives. The silence in the room felt like it lasted forever. 30 people stood frozen as they processed what Chuck had just announced. Sarah Martinez, the quiet grandmother who practiced in Lane 15, was actually a retired Secret Service agent. She had spent 28 years protecting presidents and training federal agents in the most dangerous situations imaginable. Jake Stevens felt his face turn red with embarrassment. He remembered all the times he had offered to give Sarah shooting tips. He had suggested she try different stances and grip techniques. Now he realized he had been giving advice to someone who had literally written training manuals for federal law enforcement. Jake had 12 years of police experience, but Sarah had protected the President of the United States. Marcus Williams stared at Sarah with his mouth open. He owned a security company and was proud of his tactical knowledge. Marcus had often criticized Sarah's old-fashioned shooting style and basic equipment. Now he understood that her techniques came from the highest levels of government training. She had learned to shoot from instructors who trained the most elite agents in the country. Tommy Chen felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. He looked down at his expensive custom pistol with its laser sights and special grips. All his costly modifications seemed foolish compared to the simple weapon Sarah carried. Tommy had spent thousands of dollars trying to buy accuracy that Sarah had earned through decades of life and death training. Chuck Morrison stood at the front of the room, holding the brass plaque in his shaking hands. He could not believe what he had just revealed. The woman he had questioned about being in the right place was one of the most qualified shooters who had ever entered his range. Chuck had owned the facility for 15 years and had never encountered anyone with Sarah's level of expertise. Sarah herself seemed to shrink further into the back corner of the room. This was exactly what she had been trying to avoid for the past several months. After retirement, she had chosen to live quietly and anonymously. She wanted to leave behind the high-stress world of federal service and simply enjoy peaceful practice sessions without attention or questions. The other people in the room began whispering among themselves. They remembered seeing Sarah practice week after week. Now they understood why her movements had seemed so precise and professional. Every aspect of her behavior made sense when viewed through the lens of her true background and training. "I am so sorry," Chuck finally managed to say, looking directly at Sarah. "I had no idea when I planned this ceremony. Your name came up for recognition through official channels. I just knew the service record from the paperwork. I never connected it to our member Sarah Martinez." Chuck gestured helplessly with his hands as he tried to explain. He had received Sarah's information from a contact at the local Veterans Affairs office. The paperwork only showed her impressive service record and suggested she deserved recognition. Chuck had never imagined the legendary agent described in the documents was practicing quietly at his range. Sarah stepped forward slowly, her cheeks slightly pink but her voice steady and controlled. "Please do not apologize," she said softly. "I understand how this happened. I just hope to keep my past private and enjoy shooting without pressure or attention. I hope everyone can understand my position." But instead of giving her space, the crowd moved closer to Sarah. Everyone suddenly wanted to hear stories about her career and experiences. They had questions about protecting presidents, training other agents, and working in classified operations. The same people who had ignored her for months now treated her like a celebrity. Tommy was the first to approach with questions. "Agent Martinez, Sarah, can you tell us about the counter-sniper operations Chuck mentioned? Did you really train other federal agents in marksmanship?" His voice was filled with awe and curiosity that made Sarah uncomfortable. Jake pushed forward with his own questions. "What was it like protecting 3 different presidents? Did you ever have to use your weapon in the line of duty? How many agents did you train during your career?" He spoke rapidly as if afraid Sarah might disappear before he got answers. Marcus wanted to know about the tactical aspects of her work. "Can you explain the difference between Secret Service training and regular police training? What kind of weapons did you carry? How do you stay so calm under pressure?" His security company background made him hungry for professional details. Other range members joined the crowd around Sarah with their own questions and requests. Some wanted autographs on their shooting targets. Others asked if she would pose for photographs with them. A few people took out their phones to record videos of the famous agent they had discovered. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention and curiosity. She had spent her entire career working in the shadows where anonymity was crucial for success. Being the center of attention felt wrong and dangerous even though she was retired. Her instincts told her to escape the crowd and find somewhere quiet to think. "I appreciate your interest," Sarah said, raising her voice slightly to address the entire group. "But I am not comfortable being the focus of attention. I came here to practice shooting peacefully, not to relive my career or answer questions about classified operations." The crowd began to quiet down as they realized Sarah was not going to satisfy their curiosity about her secret agent experiences. Some people looked disappointed while others seemed to understand her need for privacy. The initial excitement was fading as reality set in. Chuck tried to restore order by asking people to give Sarah some space. "Let us remember that Agent Martinez is here as a private citizen now," he announced. "She deserves the same respect and privacy as any other range member. The Wall of Honor ceremony is over, so please return to your activities." Slowly, the crowd began to disperse. Some people went back to their practice lanes while others left the range entirely. But many lingered nearby, hoping for a chance to speak privately with Sarah or observe her shooting techniques. The revelation had changed everything about how people saw the quiet woman in Lane 15. Sarah remained in the lobby area feeling uncertain about what to do next. She could return to her practice session and ignore the stares and whispers. She could leave immediately and never come back to avoid further attention. Or she could find some middle ground that acknowledged her. New situation while protecting her privacy. In the days following the Wall of Honor ceremony, Sarah faced the most difficult decision she had made since retiring. She could stop coming to Richmond's shooting range and find somewhere else to practice. This would avoid the awkward stares and constant questions from curious members. Or she could stay and find a way to move forward that honored both her need for privacy and the genuine interest of fellow shooters. After thinking carefully for 3 days, Sarah chose a path that surprised everyone, including herself. She decided to stay at the range but on her own terms. Sarah would continue her regular practice schedule, but she would also offer quiet, informal instruction to anyone who asked respectfully and seriously wanted to learn. The first person to approach Sarah with a genuine request for help was Jake Stevens. He waited until she finished her practice session on Thursday afternoon before walking over to Lane 15. Jake had been thinking about his embarrassing behavior since the ceremony. He wanted to apologize and ask if Sarah might be willing to share some of her knowledge. Agent Martinez, Jake began nervously. I want to apologize for all the times I offered you shooting advice. I had no idea about your background and experience. I was completely out of line. Sarah looked at Jake for a moment before responding. She could see that his embarrassment was real and his apology was sincere. Please call me Sarah, she said with a small smile. And you do not need to apologize. You were trying to be helpful, based on what you could observe. That shows good intentions. Jake felt relieved by her gracious response. Would you be willing to give me some instruction sometime? I realize now that everything I thought I knew about shooting was probably wrong. I would be honored to learn from someone with your expertise. Sarah considered the request carefully. She had spent many years teaching other agents and law enforcement officers. Part of her had always enjoyed the process of helping people improve their skills and understanding. Maybe she could find a way to share knowledge without revealing classified details about her past operations. I can work with you, Sarah agreed. But I want to be clear about the conditions. We focus on fundamentals, safety, and proper technique. I will not discuss specific operations or classified aspects of my career. And we work quietly, without attracting attention from other members. Jake eagerly accepted these conditions. They arranged to meet the following Tuesday for Sarah's first informal lesson since retirement. Word about the private instruction spread quietly among the regular members. Within a week, Marcus Williams and Tommy Chen had also asked Sarah if she would be willing to work with them. Sarah agreed to help Marcus and Tommy under the same conditions she had set with Jake. She was not interested in becoming a formal instructor or charging money for lessons. This was simply a way to share knowledge with people who were serious about improving their shooting skills and understanding of firearm safety. The first lesson with Jake took place on a quiet Tuesday morning. Sarah began not with shooting techniques, but with a discussion of mindset and mental preparation. She explained that accurate shooting started in the mind long before pulling the trigger. Fear, excitement, and ego were the enemies of consistent performance. Most people try to shoot too fast, Sarah told Jake as they stood in lane 15. They want to impress others or compete with shooters in nearby lanes. But real marksmanship requires patience, discipline, and focus on the process rather than the results. Sarah demonstrated proper breathing techniques that she had learned during counter-sniper training. She showed Jake how to inhale normally, exhale halfway, hold his breath naturally, and fire during the respiratory pause. This technique helped eliminate the movement caused by breathing and provided a stable platform for accurate shots. Next, Sarah worked with Jake on grip consistency. She explained that most shooters gripped their weapons differently each time they picked them up. This inconsistency made it impossible to develop reliable accuracy. Sarah taught Jake to grip the pistol, the same way every time with the same pressure applied by each finger. Jake was amazed by the immediate improvement in his shooting. By focusing on breathing and grip consistency, his groupings became much tighter. Shots that had been scattered across the target were now hitting within a few inches of each other. The improvement came not from expensive equipment, but from proper technique and mental discipline. Marcus Williams learned similar lessons when Sarah began working with him the following week. As someone who owned a security company, Marcus thought he understood tactical shooting. But Sarah showed him that real tactical skills were about making accurate shots quickly under extreme stress, not just looking professional with expensive gear. Sarah taught Marcus about threat assessment and decision-making under pressure. She explained how Secret Service agents learned to evaluate situations instantly and choose the appropriate level of response. These skills were more valuable for security work than any equipment or accessories Marcus could buy. Tommy Chen proved to be Sarah's most challenging student. He was so focused on his expensive modifications and custom equipment that he had trouble accepting Sarah's emphasis on basic fundamentals. Tommy wanted to learn advanced techniques and special tactics, not practice boring grip and stance exercises. But Sarah was patient with Tommy's resistance to simple instruction. She gradually helped him understand that his expensive equipment was actually hurting his performance. The laser sights made him lazy about proper aiming. The custom grips felt different each time he adjusted them. Tommy's accuracy improved dramatically when he learned to rely on basic skills rather than expensive accessories. Chuck Morrison watched these informal lessons with growing respect for Sarah's teaching abilities. He saw how she transformed the attitudes and performance of his most challenging members. Sarah's emphasis on safety, fundamentals, and mental discipline was changing the entire culture of the shooting range. Chuck approached Sarah with a proposal. Would she be willing to help him develop a more welcoming environment for new shooters and people who had been intimidated by the aggressive, equipment-focused atmosphere? Sarah agreed to help create basic safety courses and introductory marksmanship classes. These new programs attracted a more diverse group of people to Richmond Shooting Range. Women who had felt out of place among the tactical gear enthusiasts began joining the classes. Older adults who had been intimidated by the competitive atmosphere found Sarah's patient teaching style encouraging and supportive. The Wall of Honor ceremony had revealed Sarah's impressive credentials and background, but her actions in the months that followed earned her something more valuable than recognition or fame. She gained the genuine respect of people who understood that true expertise was not about bragging or showing off expensive equipment. Sarah still practiced 3 times each week in Lane 15. She still kept detailed notes in her small spiral notebook and maintained her methodical approach to marksmanship. But now she was surrounded by people who appreciated what they were witnessing. They understood they were learning from someone whose skills had been tested in situations where accuracy meant the difference between life and death. The modest woman who had been dismissed and overlooked had taught everyone at Richmond Shooting Range important lessons about assumptions, humility, and the quiet heroes who lived among them. Sarah had shown that real expertise did not need to announce itself with loud voices and expensive equipment. The most dangerous and capable people were often the ones who looked most ordinary and unassuming.